Way more efficient. And probably safer, too.
Parker!
Dr. Octavius, what you got there?
Chinese. If I know you'd be here, I would have... What are you working on?
Oh, just a side project.
Of course. It's you.
I don't know what
Oh,
you're...
come on, Parker, it's obvious.
Let me explain.
I only wish you'd told me sooner.
I wanted to, but I was afraid that if word got out, my family might be in danger.
Yes. I guess if you design his equipment, you're bound to be a target too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't worry. Your secret's safe. Well, I'll leave you to it.
Check your email. Hope this isn't how Doc fires me.
Peter, the revelation of your second job as Spider-Man suit crafter. Is that the right term?
White spider, huh? Excuse me, late for work! Coming through!
Looking good, Spidey!
Hello, New York! Haha! New suit, same old me.
Spider-Man, I think I figured out how Fisk's men are keeping his rackets running. Construction sites.
Wasn't that shut down when he was arrested?
No, it's one of his legitimate business.